You are listening to a Raptors podcast, the place every week for all things Raptors. Get ready and never underestimate the heart of a champion. Welcome back to a Raptors podcast. I'm your host, as always, Lucky Roberts. As the last 2 weeks have been 1 and 2, this one followed suit as the Raptors beat the Hornets and then ensuingly lost against the 76ers and Denver Nuggets. It's sort of an expected result after those 3 games, and it's a tough situation that the Raptors are currently in, being now 11 and 17, and as the season progresses, we're going to have to see if the trades are going to be made and if anything's going to change. And the first game is one I actually witnessed in person, the Raptors versus the Hornets. It's one going into that you expected the Raptors to be able to win, especially because of how they lost last game. You knew that they were going to come back with some fire. And, the 2 players that have been showing up for the Raptors this season continued to. Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam really brought the effort here. Siakam earlier on and Scottie, turning it on at the end, how he usually does. Scottie had 17 rebounds in this game, 22 points. The rebounds were just constant. He had 7 in the first quarter or something. And he just continued the pace up and on. But it started out as the scoring flurry from Siakam. The Charlotte went on a sort of a big early lead here in the first quarter. They had 8 points, and it was Siakam's work to, bring them back in the second quarter, in the ensuing third quarter. And it was the fourth with Scottie Barnes' emergence, with Gary Trent's 3-point barrage, where they were able to, get a hold onto this game. And up until then, it was a very close one that could have gone either way, which is a team, as I'll continue to say, we should not be in close fights with. Gary Trent actually had 10 rebounds in this one as well. I think it was one of his best games all season, maybe even the best. He was 4 for 10 from 3. He took a lot of shots, but he was hitting them. And, it was something that was really looking good for his future performances. He's sort of been the forgotten player. I've called for him to be traded unless his play has increased, and his performances have gotten a little bit better as this season has gone on. But it's gonna take a lot more for me to be convinced that it was just a early season slump. But maybe this is what we need for his value to get back up to a resembling place where we are able to deal him for a full $1 instead of 90 cents on the dollar. So we'll have to see how it progresses. But he was plus 25 in this game, highest plus minus for the Raptors. And, for the Hornets, it was Terry Rozier playing really well. He always seems to have a great game against the Raptors. He was their best player by far. He's a very, surprisingly clutch player. He always seems to hit, a big 3 when he needs it. He had 22 in this one, 9 for 20. Every other, Charlotte Hornet was a little inefficient. Brandon Miller, PJ Washington having 15 and 14 respectively, but all on bad efficiency. Nick Richards was pretty good in this one. Bruce McGowens was probably their second best player, who Bryce actually made probably. I was unfamiliar before watching this game of his game, but now I am, and he played pretty well. I think it is Bryce. But it wasn't enough for the Hornets to, have any substantial footing in that fourth quarter where the Raptors really poured it on. It was a poor performance from OG, but he's going to have those. He usually has 1 or 2 good games a week or 1 and 2 bad games a week, and that's sort of how it goes for him. And this was one of his bad games, but it was good that Scottie Barnes and Siakam were able to keep up the performance. Schroeder was, really efficient, which is something that he's not really been this season. He was really efficient, got his assists in, still had 3 turnovers, but, Barnes had 5, so it's going to happen. And he played in his role, which is something he hasn't really done so far this season, so it was a nice change of pace for him. Achua also is another one of these players who's sort of come on as this season has gone on, similar to Gary Trent. he's now making the right reads, and he's, instead of spacing out for three every time, he's making these cuts and getting above the rim where he's really, really effective and able to jump and dunk it down instead of taking a 33% shooter at best, So really impressive from him. Malachi not his game, but you can sort of see the players on the bench that we want to use, our 9-man rotation, if you will. And we've been lucky not to get any injuries this season, but, this is probably not the season you want to not have any injuries. We could have saved that luck for other seasons, but hey, whatever happens, happens, right? And the Raptors still aren't good enough. As we move on to talk about the Nuggets game, where, first of all, Jokic is so good. I mean, he just makes the game look like a different type of basketball than you've ever seen, and he and Murray play off each other so well. Murray had a good game as well, but Jokic had 31, 15, and 6, only 2 turnovers, 2 blocks as well. Really efficient, hitting threes. He had this catch and shoot at the buzzer to end the game, to and push the Nuggets out of reach from the Raptors. And he's just such a good player, and I'm not the first one to realize this, but you really do appreciate greatness when you see it. And seeing it from Nikola was really, really impressive tonight. Not tonight, I don't know why I said that, but really impressive to see nonetheless. And their team is just works so well together, and they haven't been the world beaters they were last season. But as I've been saying in our second segments, the Nuggets are gonna have to pour it on as it goes, and in the playoffs they really are able to find a second gear, as we saw last season. So I'm not too worried about whatever happens in this beginning part of the season as it slowly moves to the midpoint. But I do think that their players just mesh so well together. KCP, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, they all know their role, which is really important in a team, and it's something that's really not being something that the Raptors have struggled with. It's something that they've struggled with for a couple seasons, players being forced to play in roles, that they're not qualified for, or players, not having enough, having too many good players for the amount of roles that we really have to fill. And so this season, I don't know if we've struggled with that as much, as just our overall talent isn't as good, but I do think, players trying to play roles they're not really qualified for is an issue we've had, and being forced to play up a role or two is something that's been a struggle, as most of our bench players and most of our just, stars even aren't up to snuff to other teams' stars, and that, it takes an effect, and it's why we're losing to teams like the Nuggets, and it's why we're losing to teams against the 76ers, and that's just how it's going to go when you don't have the talent. And I'm not going to blame the coaching, because it's really situational, and a lot of basketball is situational. A lot of all sports is. It's not about the player; it's where you get drafted, and it's what role you're put into, and the opportunities that you have, how the fans receive you, your emotions at the time. It's really a complicated business, and I don't think it's all black and white, where this player was gonna be good no matter where he was drafted, like many people seem to think with these redrafts, because who knows? It's a different situation, and just like any other person in life, it's a different situation, and you can't really expect the same result, because there's so many variables, and that could be a difference between the Nuggets and the Raptors, and it happens sometimes. But it was a great, really impressive showing from Scotty Barnes, who sort of took up the mantle to face off against Jokic. He had 30 points of his own, as well as double-digit rebounds and 5 or more assists with only 2 turnovers. He was 1 for 5 from 3, which is a little below his percentages, but really efficient. Missed a free throw, but he was really good, and he took up that mantle, and it was Siakam's turn to play second fiddle, where he had 18 relatively efficient points, and didn't really control the ball as much, only had 1 assist, But it was Scotty's game, and Schroeder once again played in his role a little bit. And I sound, a little optimistic for a loss, but, I'm not really expecting us to beat the Nuggets, and I thought it was a competitive showing. And it was, once again an encouraging performance from Achua. He had 13 points, efficient points, some rebounds, assists, steal, block, really filling it up where he needs to. And just, once again, playing in his role. And you see Schroeder playing in his role. Podol, not really playing up to his role. OG, once again, not playing up to his role, only 9 points in this one. But, you're like I said, you're going to have those games from OG. It's just he has too many inconsistent nights for, offensively at least, too many inefficient nights where you need him to be more consistent. But, yeah, Podol as well. I was impressed with him in the 76ers game that I'll get to, but, in this Nuggets game, he just really didn't have the capability to face off against Jokic. They're not the same player, obviously. They don't play the same style, but he just really, it shows the difference between them as players. Then off the bench as well, Gary Trent had 12 points, sort of as this holiday season sort of trudges on. He's played, a good brand of basketball, and I like to see it from him because there is definitely talent in there and definitely consistency in there somewhere. We just have to be able to bring it out of him. And Darko, once again, continues to show his ability to develop players, and maybe it's just taken a while to get through to Gary because they just have such contrasting styles, which, I think that is a valid point. I'm going to talk about the 76ers game here, where the Raptors, for the first time in however many games, got out to a lead at the end of the first quarter. And, you start to believe a little, which is not something always you should be doing when you're playing the 76ers with a team as much talent as the Raptors has. But Siakam had his game going. He gets to the free throw line a lot. That's honestly one of the big differences between his game and Scotty Barnes' game is, they're very similar. They're both, Scotty might be a better shooter now, actually, which is, I'm very happy to be able to say that. But Siakam gets to the free throw line and knocks him down. If Scotty learns how to get to the free throw line, that's another 5 points per game that he's missing from Siakam's 5 points per game. And when he gets that, he's going to be really, really tough to guard. It just adds a whole nother dimension to his already, nuanced game here. And he struggled in this one. And, he sort of came on strong to start the season, had a bit of a slump there for a couple of weeks, and he's brought it back in the last couple. This one, you would like to say this is going to happen sometimes, and especially against a really strong defensive coach like Nick Nurse and a strong defensive team like the 76ers. Not everybody's going to be able to step up to the challenge. And today, Tobias Harris, Embiid, and Maxey combining for 90 points really shut him down. Morris Sr., Covington, they've got Paul Reed as well. They've got a lot of great defenders on this team, and they have the scores to boot. Tobias Harris, with his, you hear on the broadcast, his best performance of the season, 33 points. He just had it from the beginning, from the get-go. He had 18 in the first half, I think, and matched it basically in the second. And he brought rebounds and assists. Tobias Harris, he's one of the players you forget about. He's like, oh yeah, they have Tobias Harris. Oh, that's cool. You sort of forget about him as a better player in the NBA, but he really is an above-average guy, and a guy you have to think about. And when he has it going, when Embiid has it going like he had it tonight with 9 assists, 10 rebounds, he had 6 turnovers, which the Raptors are always able to get to him in that sense. But Embiid really, had his scoring touch, got the free throw line, and Maxey as well. Maxey always goes off against the Raptors. I think he really has a sore spot from that playoff season 2 seasons ago, where, the Raptors and sort of fans started talking a lot of stuff to the 76ers. I think he has a little bit of a sore spot, and he went off for 33 points, 10 assists, 4 threes, doing a lot of it without getting to the free throw line. And he was, he continues to grow and grow, and he's one of the competitors to Scotty Barnes in their most improved seasons. It's interesting looking at the 76ers bench. They really didn't show much at all, and these teams are pretty similar in that way, where the Raptors, don't have much of a bench either. Gary Trent was good in this one, but they're experimenting with Grady Dick and McDaniels and Achua, Otto Porter, Flynn as well, but they're not the replacement level players, at the end of the day. And the 76ers were able to capitalize on that. And the 76ers as well, just with players like Robert Covington, Paul Reed, Daniel House Jr., these guys are given 0 points, 4, 3. Sure, they're, plus 15 and on the game, which, it shows like they put some positive amount into it. But, they have higher plus minuses than Embiid, but I feel like that really speaks more to how bad this Raptors bench is, where the best guy coming off the bench, you would say today, is Gary Trent, had 17 points, 5 threes. He's a negative 10 for plus minus. And, we look down the bench, and I've been praising Achua. He's 2 for 9 in this one. But he is, 6 rebounds. He's got some steals, but it's just not enough, and it's very inconsistent. A player who I think had a really great bounce-back game was Podol, who has been struggling under Darko. He had 19 in this one, and really making the reads you would want to make, which is something that I've been critical of him over the season, is that he hasn't been able to make the pass where you see Embiid make a pass, or where you see Jokic make a pass. And I'm sure I'm comparing him to the two best centers in the league, but at the end of the day, you have to be compared to them. And he was able to make the next pass, and he didn't seem clueless. He didn't seem clumsy. And sure, he didn't do an amazing job at Embiid. He still got his points. Embiid's going to get his 31, which is what he's averaging on the season. But he was able to make him work and give him some hell on the offensive side as well. And so we need to see more of this type of Podol, who's more engaged into the game, playing a nice two-man game with Schroeder, who didn't have the best game of his own, but Schroeder was feeding Podol a lot, and you just want to see that continue, and hopefully we will with these upcoming games. It was another disappointing performance from OG. Pascal and Podol and Gary were the only real offensive weapons for the Raptors today. OG, he had 0 threes, which is really the most important part of the game for the Raptors, of his game, because he's the best shooter on this team. And so when he is a down game, who else is going to pick it up? Because you didn't see Malachi pick it up. You saw Gary pick it up. But other than that, nobody was hitting threes today, and the team struggled as a whole because of it. They still put up 110, which is a good offensive performance for the Raptors this season, but they just weren't able to stop the three-headed monster of the 76ers enough for that to really matter for anything. But once again, I'm not really upset about this, because we're not expecting to beat the 76ers, and we're keeping it to 10, and sure, you would like it to be a bit closer, and you'd like them to compete a bit more. But they were really into this game up until the fourth, where they sort of lost it. And the same with the Nuggets. Up until the fourth, they sort of lost it. And it's, you can see the tiers sort of establish themselves here. The Raptors are a tier above the Hornets, and they're a tier below the 76ers and Nuggets, maybe a couple of tiers below. So I'm not going to be too pressed about losing to them teams. It's just, when you're looking at the record 11-17, it's sort of dawns on you that this team isn't good, and it sort of demoralizes you as a fan. And so I'm trying not to bring that negative energy onto you guys. And so, it's tough that the Raptors are going to lose another week, where they're now, like I said, 11-17 on the season, 1-2 on the week. But that's going to happen this year, and it's going to happen for, I would assume, at least another couple years. But we'll have to see, and we'll have to see the development that this team progresses over time. So as we look to the games in the future, the next couple games coming up, the ones that I'll be talking to you is the Saturday matchup against Utah. I know I'm bringing you a little bit of an early episode. I thought I would be talking to you after the Utah game, but I got some Christmas, things I got to do, and so I'm not really able to send out a pod that quickly. So we'll be doing that one after Utah, Washington, Boston, and then maybe even after that Detroit game. We'll have to see, which I do think is going to be quite an interesting one to see if Detroit continues losing their ways. But I'm sure I'll be talking to you after that one. And so it's going to be a quick 4-game stretch here where the Raptors really should be looking to go 3-1 with Utah missing all their players, Washington being Washington, Detroit being Detroit. But we'll have to see on that little road trip. But, after that, we'll talk to you and hopefully we'll have some better things to talk about. But I'll quickly, go over the lay of the land in the East, and I'll be right back in a sec. All right, so I am back here to just talk about the lay of the land around the NBA landscape here. Once again, continue to say Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks, 76ers at the top, all 8-2 in their last 10, continue to be really impressive. Celtics still yet to lose a home game. You see the Magic, the Heat, the Knicks right behind them, and you're going to throw in Cleveland in as well. Cleveland actually having a negative point differential on the season, but it does not seem to have mattered for them as they're 16-13 so far at home and away is something that I've, will continue to push for all these teams. The Heat on a 2-game win streak, Magic we're trying to push themselves up into that upper echelon in that Eastern Conference, but they have really slowed down, losing 4 in a row. But that's how it's going to go, and so you can't be too upset about how any of these things are going to happen because that's basketball. The Pacers and Nets and Chicago Bulls, the Nets sort of losing 5 in a row, something that I've expected them to sort of eventually bottom out. You don't see them having the same talent levels as a Cavs team, as Indiana, as the Knicks. And so them being 13-15 is sort of where you would expect them to be in this point of the season. They are sort of falling closer to the level of the Chicago Bulls, Atlanta Hawks, and the Raptors as well, who, despite dropping 2, in a row, 3 of their last 7, are still sort of in this play-in race. Play-in race that I would not want us to be in, and I don't think the Raptors really want to be in, or at least any of our fans. And so we'll be really happy just to see the Bulls continue to win, continue their win streak. The Hawks to continue, being the Hawks, being 500 as they are, and us to really join the Pistons, Wizards, and Hornets. And I know we don't want to join the Pistons, and we don't want to join the Hornets or Wizards, but we want to join them philosophically. Not philosophically, we want to join them realistically, and that's sort of what we're doing. And we have games against the Wizards and Pistons coming up, and so especially against the Pistons, should be a win. As we look at the Western Conference here, Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets are really, really impressive. They continue to be the top of the Western Conference. Nuggets chugging through the season, as you saw against the Raptors. They won, not in convincing fashion, and I think they're really taking it slow after having an extended playoffs last season, extended play. They're going to keep their guys healthy, and they're going to keep, they're not going to worry about a couple losses here and there as long as they're in those top 4 seeds, top 6 seeds. And they still continue to be, near the top of that Western Conference. Despite that, you've got the Kings sort of clipping their heels at 17-10. The Clippers as well, Pelicans. The middle of this Western Conference is much better than the middle of the Eastern Conference, and especially, as you look towards the play-in tournament, you've got teams 5 games under 500 in the play-in tournament in the East, and in the West, you've got a team like the Warriors who are 500, not even in the play-in tournament. So it's really tough. The Warriors winning 4 games in a row really turned it around. They had a really impressive game against the Celtics, overtime game. Steph Curry with a huge floater, floating shot, almost hitting the top of the ceiling of the Chase Center, and it was the dagger for them to win. And it was a really important game, I think, for mentality, morale for this Warriors team as they really try to get their stuff together in a season that has not gone their way so far. You have the Suns, the Lakers as well, who have fallen to earth, losing 3 and 4 in a row, 2 respectively for both of them. The Mavericks also losing 3 in a row, and they've sort of lost their spot to the Pelicans in that automatic playoffs spots. And they, after their really, really hot start, where they were looking pretty solidified, they've cooled off. Luka Doncic still playing really well, but Kyrie Irving and the rest of that Mavericks team sort of cooling off. The Rockets continue to impress. 6 of 4 in their last 10, really holding it together, treading water just above that 500 mark. And it's something that a place you didn't expect them to be. But where you did expect teams to be, like the Jazz, Grizzlies, Blazers, and Spurs, is at the bottom of that Western Conference. Jazz sort of looking like the Raptors of the West, where they're just going to bottom out here. They do have some talent, but it's more beneficial for them to join that bottom 3. And so that's going to do it for me today on a Raptors pod. Thank you for listening as always. It's a pleasure, and I'll always enjoy talking to you guys about the Raptors for a good 20-30 minutes. So thank you for listening. Have a happy holidays. I hope everybody enjoys this little bit of a break, and as we get back to work. So thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll have a nice present or so of a week next week. So thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.